Hello everyone and welcome back to after quite a long break. I decided that it's time to go at it again. Nothing much, just trying to pick up where we left off with our Sveltekit starter. The project that I would like to use as a base for any future projects, I think that was or is due a long time now. So yeah, with that out of the way, just a couple of things. Last time we added some content for the public pages, and off stream I finished some of that. Another thing that happened in the meantime was the fact that Shadcn actually made the update to Tailwind in v4, which was really nice, and the migration to Tailwind v4 was done off stream. So because there was not much to it, I mean, you could either use the script, the migration script that Tailwind provides, and a couple of things that I think there is also a migration script provided by the Shadcn for the actual CSS of the components. But I decided to just, strap everything and go from nothing, since, it was just a recently started project. And that's where we start today. The next thing to focus on would be the authentication part. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Let me quickly open the terminal and try to run this. Looks like it's taking its time. So in order to make to actually add the authentication part, we will use Lucia Auth for this, which previously was an actual package, JavaScript package, but nowadays is just a set of utilities you can just copy paste and it works great. Okay, nice. So yeah, as you can see, everything is working as expected. One thing that I probably should mention, the next version of Shadcn, is the fact that previously in the theming section there was you actually had a default and a New York theme, and I think that the difference was the roundness of the elements. So you can see the border radius here is a bit more rounded, and also the spacing between some elements. So if we take a look at the Shadcn, which uses version 4 of Svelte, and yeah, we take a look at the default versus, and maybe switching to a lighter theme. Okay, so you can see here slightly, but yeah, I think that it's not that. Oh yeah, definitely you can see it in the border radius, but also the spacing of elements. And now you only have the New York style. I'm not sure why that decision was made, because just out of curiosity, the original project okay, probably that's why. So the original project basically has only one theme, which is what the Svelte Shadcn version refers as the New York theme. So yeah, that must be it. Okay, on to the next part, which is Lucia Auth. So as you can see, is a learning resource on implementing auth from scratch. So that's what we will do. And let's just take a look to see. All right, so here we have it. First of all, we will need to set up the database and the tables that we will have. And as you can see, the minimal thing that you need is a user and a session table. So those are basically the only two things that you would probably need. We will add some more things on top of that, and you'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. And after that, you basically have these utility methods for basically managing user sessions. So that's what Lucia was doing under the hood. And because most of the effort of the author was geared towards different integrations with providers for databases, and because of the APIs would change very often, the decision was made to only have these utility methods provided, which is fine, and if you ask me, because you basically don't need anything more than that. So first things first, as I mentioned, we will be using SQLite database. We will be using, as you maybe remember from last time, we are using Cloudflare for as our infrastructure provider. So we will be using Cloudflare D1 for our database needs. And under the hood, Cloudflare D1 is a SQLite database. So that's what we will be using here. So back to our project, we just have to make a little adjustment to our Drizzle config. So okay, so those two verbose and strict, I'd like to move them up. And for the schema, so what we have here is the default recommendation, which as you can see in the setup, states that we have our entire schema in this file right here in the schema.ts, But I actually like, especially when the project gets bigger and you have many more tables. If you have a decently structured DB, it would be a nightmare to track only one file. So that's why I prefer to have this setup right here, where I tell that I'm not looking for a specific file, but I use this globe pattern to specify that it should look into a directory where you will find many more files for our schema. So our schema is spread across multiple files because it's easier to manage that way. And one thing that I also like to mention is this option right here, and Copilot was nice to infer for me that our migrations folder, or basically the Drizzlekit output directory, which will entail migrations, will be this folder right here. In the DB folder under the server, we'll have a migrations folder. And the last thing that I want to do is make sure to eliminate this right here, because we will not be using this database URL. This will be only used in our local environment. That's because, and the only reason we need this is because we will also like to be able to use Drizzle Studio. In case you're not familiar with it, it's basically a database management system provided by the Drizzle team, which is super nice. But we will only be using that locally. That's why we will set the database URL only when we are on a local environment. And because of that, we actually need to check that, or how I would like to do is in the process env dot, and we have this node env, which I usually set. So if we are not on the production environment, only in that case we will be using the database URL. And maybe, yeah, sometime I like to also set up a staging environment, but I'm not exactly sure if I want to do that. So for me, the staging environment depends on your use case. You can actually set a staging environment that you can use for testing before everything goes to prod. But for me, it's just or was a thing that I used at some point to test the Wrangler bindings locally. But I'm thinking, I don't think I will be using that. So yeah, I think this is enough. So this is all the setup we need for the Drizzle configuration. Okay, next would be the actual database tables being created. So here in this example, I think I will just delete this file. Also in our index file in the DB directory. Okay, so what we will do is make sure to create first schema directory and an index.ts file. where we will export things, and I like to structure the tables that we have in 3 groups for the moment. So in our schema, we will have an auth.ts, a profile.ts, and something that we will be using at some point would be feedback.ts. And even though some of the things that we will be creating now won't be used until later, I would still like to have them. And in our index file, I like to set up a barrel. I think that's what it's called, a barrel export structure. So export everything from auth, from feedback, and from profile. And it will yell at first because we don't actually have anything in those files. But in here you can see that our export, and I think I will just, instead of that, we'll just do export star from schema. Okay, that should do it. And also we will need to delete everything that we have here, because we will not be constructing our client here. We'll come back to that a bit later. The only thing that I like to put in here is a little utility method that will come in handy at some point. Which is a lower method. This should be any SQLite column. And this will just return the SQL operator from Drizzle ORM. Like so. So this is the SQL lower method for that. And just to separate this like so. And there we have it. That's our initial exporting file. Now, in our schema definition, we will set up a couple of tables. And first of all, just a quick overview. I like to have a or what Lucia provides here as the user and session table is stuff related to authentication. And in the user table, I only like to keep the bare minimum necessary in order to determine what we need for the authentication part. That's why I also added a separate profile file, and in there we'll have a profile directory, a profile table, sorry about that, and that will be linked to the user table, but we'll keep anything other than authentication stuff, like depending on your use case and what you want to have on your user profile. Things like, I don't know, first name, last name, display name, stuff like that. So that's the basic structure. So we will have our user table, our session table, and our profile table. Apart from that, I would also like to add 2 things. First, a a role-based authentication structure, authorization, sorry. So after we are done with the authentication part, we will take a look into authorizing the users, providing them roles which give them certain accesses throughout the application. And another thing that I like to add in here is a little concept called invite, which basically is a way to let the user, or only let people authenticate to your application based on certain criteria. Like, you need to invite someone in order to be able to use your app. And this is something optional, of course, but I like to structure that way, and I have a simple mechanism for dealing with conditionally turning that invite process on and off. So I'll show you at the right time what I mean by that, but I just like to have that in order, to have something like, think of it like a closed beta, for example, where you open public sign up on your app only when you want to. Until that point, you only let a certain number of users to come in. So, with that being said, let's start and implement our DB structure. So, first of all, we will be starting with our invites table, which will be a SQLite table from Drizzle. Okay. Sure, name it invites. And in here, we will have 4 columns. First, we will have an ID, which will be a text column. And yeah, SQLite core will take it. So the idea is that I like to use GUIDs for the keys in my table, even though there are pros and cons and there is a lot of debate around that, but it's just something that I'm used to. But there's just only one thing, which is that SQLite doesn't actually have a GUID type. Everything is just, text. And because of that, you don't actually have, I think that there are some sort of plugins that you can install onto your SQLite instance to manage that, but you don't have a built-in way to generate GUIDs like you have, for example, in a Postgres database. And because of that, I came up with a small hack for this, and let me just grab this from somewhere because I don't actually know it by heart. And here is, and one more thing, we just need to make sure to put the not null constraint because we don't want the ID to ever be null. Basically what this does is creates a, I think this would be some sort of GUID v4 structure. It's not actually a GUID, so there is just a random blob sequence. You can see we construct random blobs of characters, and just some of the characters are made so that they resemble the GUID v4 structure. And technically with this, so the GUID basically guarantees that you don't ever have conflicts of non-unique values. This way, technically, you can get into that, and you can have keys in your database that are not unique. But I think that the chances are really low. So yeah, I will just go like so. Okay. Besides that, we will need an email column, which will basically be the you send an email to invite someone on the app, and upon receiving that email, the person being in this invites table will be able to create an account. Okay, we also would need this created at column, and instead of, I think we can use this one, but I'm not exactly sure what kind of format will this the datetime now give us. So I would like to just use the current timestamp. And for me, the last thing that I want is actually a column for active. Okay, so yeah, we imported the wrong integer type. We want this from SQLite. So again, in SQLite we don't have bits, true or false. We just have integer, but we can use an integer column like here, and Drizzle is smart enough to, so as you probably saw here, we have a setting for this column called mode, and your integer can have different modes. I think that by default is number, which is basically saying that Drizzle will cast this value as a JavaScript number, but you can also use a boolean and a timestamp for this one. And this right here is the structure of our invites table. I like to use this active boolean right here as let's say control column, which means that, for example, even if you turn off the user invite table or user invite flow, you can also use that as a way to manage some users on the system. Like, for example, the active users that you have here in the invites can then be, transferred on, let's say, sort of a newsletter list or something like that. So yeah, I like to have that in there. And also a thing that I like to do whenever I define the tables is to have the infer types for this, and I like this to be invite select and invite insert, which will be the inference type from that one, which will give us our TypeScript type that we can use in our app. So you can see that the select one provides the ID, email, and created at an active, but the insert type basically has only the email as a required parameter, because both the ID, the created at, and the active have default values which can be inserted by the database. And in case I need those somewhere in the code, I like to have them prepared. Usually I tend to use the Zod validators for that, which we will come at some point, but you know, I like to keep them at hand in case I ever need them. Okay, next up is the user table, which is again a SQLite table. Oops. Okay, and in here we will basically have, okay, so yeah, Copilot is smart enough to infer everything that I need in here, which I'll just take it and just remove this updated that because I don't care about that in the context of our user table. But basically the user will only have an ID, an email, and a created at. Why only these few columns? Because when implementing authentication, I like to use the Magic Link authentication system, which basically means that you don't set a password for a user, but you only rely on the code that you send to the user via email. So every time if you use something like Notion, for example, that's where this thing is also used. Basically, if you have whenever you sign in, you receive a code via email. So that way, that's the only source of truth for your security needs. And there are pros and cons, but for me, the pros outweighs the cons in this case. And one thing that I probably forgot to do is in here, make sure, and we will do this in both the invites and the user table, to set a unique constraint for the email. So we will have our unique index from SQLite, and we will set an index for the email to make sure that our emails are unique. And yeah, probably it would be good to name it unique index so that we know that is not a normal one. And same thing in here for our user table, and I think it messed up the parentheses there. So user email unique index, and that's our second table. And let's make sure to also export the types. Thank you very much. And we'll come back to the relations after we defined our other tables. Next, we will have our sessions table, which again is a SQLite table. And in here, we will have only 3 columns again. I don't care about this created at column. And I think, yeah, it messed up the parentheses there. So we will have an ID, user ID, which, let me just move this out of the way. First, let's tackle the expires at, which will not be a text, but actually will be an integer with a mode of timestamp. And yeah, it looks okay. And our user will be a reference, or will have a reference to the users, oh, come on, dot ID table. And let's make sure that on delete and on update we have cascade. So I messed up the name, so I usually like to pluralize the name of the tables, because the users table contains multiple users. The session tables contains a collection of sessions, and so on. And for the session, I like, because this references the users table, I like to set the delete action to be cascade, because that way, when or if a user disappears from our table, we will make sure that no orphaned sections remain in our sessions table. And this right here, what you see after the column definition, this reference, is basically telling SQLite that this is a foreign key, or the user ID is actually a foreign key pointing to the user's table. But later on, we will come back and add relations, which are basically things that have to do with Drizzle itself. Sorry about that. That tells Drizzle, or I think something along the lines of the engine under the hood uses that for doing queries and stuff like that. So also, let's make sure to export our types here for that. And I'm not sure if the Lucia documentation mentions this. I think that, so this page right here, or this website of the Lucia, is strictly, or has to do with strictly the authentication part, but there are also other resources from the same author, like the Copenhagen book, which is a really nice resource for understanding security measures. And one thing that I saw, I'm not sure, yeah, I think is this one, email verification. Oh no, this is actually something else. Email verification links. So yeah, the tokens. Okay, server-side tokens. Yeah, that's the part that we are interested in. So actually, if you take a look at the Lucia documentation, I'm not sure, maybe in one of the examples, you can see email passer and two-factor authentication. I think in these examples, they mention email verification, but nothing in here. But you can see here that we have a structure for our token or tokens, and yeah, this is a minimal approach, but what I like to do is name this verification codes. Okay, and in here we will have okay, we'll take this structure, but this is not necessarily everything that we need. We will have here a user ID, Basically, we tell the we'll use this logic in our code to make sure that the code is associated with one user, and we will also need to add our reference right here. And then we have our created ad with the current timestamp and another text column, which will be expires at, yeah, like so. And this will be the date, actually the daytime period in which the verification code is valid. Okay. Another thing that I want to add is the roles table. So this has to do with the authorization part. Okay, we'll need an ID and a name. And a created at column. And let's not forget our default for the ID. And yeah, basically the role table tells us that we have this structure, and we will know in our code, in the logic, how to interpret that role and determine what the user is allowed to do based on that. Now, we will also need an intermediary table in which we will basically set a many-to-many relationship. Oh, and yeah, apparently Copilot is smart enough to know that we know what we need. But I also like to add a created at column here. And yeah, basically in here, and I also like to name this users roles. Is basically telling what role a user has, because a user can have many roles, and many roles can be associated with, or one role can be associated with multiple users, and the user can probably have multiple roles at some point. Of course, in our case, we will just start small with the admin role. If the user doesn't have that, it's just a normal user. And when the time comes, I will show you what I like to do with that. Okay, so yeah. One thing that I also like to mention is the fact that this file right here is called auth, which basically entails that anything regarding either authorization or authentication lives in here. And now let's quickly do the feedback table. Okay, let's make sure that we import our structure. And this is a bit tricky. One of the hardest thing in programming is naming things. And I'm not sure as I said, usually I like to name the table the pluralized version of what that structure represents. For example, if I have a user, the table will be users, meaning that I have a collection of users or what I represent as a user. But in this case, technically, there is no plural for feedback, but because, you know, the actually feedbacks is not, I think it's not valid. But in our context, it will do. It's not that big of a problem. And let me just quickly grab our ID because we will need a primary key for our feedback table. Make sure that this comes from SQLite and this from Drizzle ORM. And we have quite a few columns that we need to add here. First, we will have a name column, then an email, message, okay, probably a subject as well. Oh, come on, just autocomplete this for me. Okay. We will also have a type, and I will just create the column right now, and I will come back to that. Also, okay, let's grab the created at. Also add an, oh, okay, I forgot to put a default right here. Same things goes for, this is the first table that we will be adding an updated add column. Keep track of when this was updated. And also I like to set a state for the feedback. And first, okay, so nah, I don't need this default right now. I will add it later. And let's take a quick look. Yeah, this looks like it. So this is our basic structure for the feedback table. This is everything that we need. So when a user leaves a feedback, you will probably need name or email to be able to contact that person, because the feedback can come, you know, anonymously, not necessarily by user in our system. A subject and a message, a type that it's useful for categorizing stuff, like, I don't know, an inquiry, a general inquiry, a bug, an improvement idea, or something like along those lines. You probably can, you know, get that from the subject itself or the message, but just for making things easier to manage, we will add that, as well as the state. For the same reason, I won't go too deep into that. We'll just have, for starters, two simple states like, you know, new and done, something like that, to know if, okay, something new has come up, or I read or took notice of that other thing. But in the future, you can, of course, go deep on that, but everything in time. In the meantime, let's just make sure. So our type and state is something that is how do I say this? It's predictable. We know we have a few types and states. So for that reason, I like to use an enum for this, which not necessarily a TypeScript enum, but just a const object where we store this. And we will have feedback types for this right here. And in here, I like to have two categories: non-support, which will be stuff like general feedback, and what I like to call general inquiry. So, a message can either be actual feedback, based on the user experience. The user wants to give you a message and talk about its experience. But it can also be something like a general inquiry. It's something else, like I don't know, a business opportunity maybe from someone. So that is non-support. And for the support part, which I'm not necessarily fond of this other, but actually we will have improvement suggestion. This will be a feature request, and this will be a bug report. Like so. And these are all our feedback types. And as I mentioned previously, for our states, we will just have close, new, and I'm not sure what to choose between closed and done. Yeah, let's just complete done. Okay, and one thing to mention here is the fact that SQLite, again, it lacks certain features that other database providers have. In this case, there is no built-in enum handling at a database level. But what we can do is tell Drizzle to treat this structure that we have the same way for integer we have a mode. Here we have certain properties. We have a mode here, but we will not be using that. Instead, we will just be using this enum right here. And in here, we will just use the values that we have. And nice and easy, we get this suggestion from Copilot. And what this will do is Drizzle will know that in these cases we expect only these types of things, and we get nice inference whenever we will be using this type column from the feedback. The same thing in here. The same thing will be for the state. We will have an enum, which will be an array of these static values. In our case, will be feedback states, new and done. And one thing that I need to mention is the fact that in here I'm not sure why, but if we leave, usually that's the point of an alias, to have it like so, so that you don't have to use relative paths for your stuff. But when you, and I think it has something to do with the fact that under the hood, when you use Drizzlekit to generate your migrations, it will actually fail if you have an alias set up. I'm not sure if it has to do with the fact that I'm setting my config in a JavaScript file, because usually the configurations are in JavaScript and I like to keep it that way. You know what? I never actually tried to see if putting the configuration in a TypeScript file will somehow tell Drizzle that, look, we have to use TypeScript, and because of that, it will actually know about the alias. It's something might worth doing. Okay, so let's just leave it like this for a moment, and we will come back to that. And the last thing that we need to do is to make sure to export our types. And that's it for the feedback table. Now on to the last one, which in our case will be our profile table. So we'll just have this one, profiles, and we won't have for the moment anything else regarding this. But if for some reason you have anything related to the user, but I don't mean I already mentioned how I like to draw the distinction. If you have something that is attached to a profile, like for example, let's say achievements, you know, if you have something like an achievement system or badge system, you know, in your app, and you like to have a connection with the profile table, here is where I would put that. But in our case, we'll just have our simple profile table, and we need export const profiles, which will be a SQLite table. And in here, as I mentioned, I like to have anything other than authorization stuff. In our case, anything other than the email which Copilot is suggesting. And I'm thinking, so here it's usually, for me, one of two things. It's either a combination of first and last name or a display name. The thing is that using a display name is a bit much better in my opinion, because I feel like it gives the user a little bit of, you know, comfort knowing that their details are not out there in the public. Like, for example, some people might not want to give their real first name and last name to some random app online, and using a display name might be a good way to, you know, hide your identity in case you need. So yeah, at first I thought that probably I will use a first and last name approach, but even for this one, I think I will be using display name. So we will need an ID here, which will be a SQLite text. Then we will actually need a user ID, which will be a reference to the users table. And in this case, this will be actually a one-to-one relationship. And you know what? Because we have the barrel import, we can import this from our index file. And other than that, we will need just these two right here. Oh, and one thing that I noticed is that we are missing a not null constraint here, because these two values will never be null, since we have default values that will be added even if they are not provided. And oh yeah, of course, we also need our display name, which will be a text column. And now I'm thinking if for this I want to add something or not. So usually when you go to a website and you enter your display name, that display name should be unique. Technically, there is no constraint for us or there is no particular reason for us to do that. But I think that I will still add a unique index for this one, just because it's customary. And usually, it's one of those things that it's so ingrained in a flow of the applications that usually users expect that, if they, for example, register first and they got their preferred nickname or display name, they will usually like to be the only ones that use that. So yeah, for this reason, I will actually go ahead and add a unique index, and this should come from SQLite core, but will not be on the user ID. It will be profiles display name unique index, and this will be on display name. And here we use our, and let me just make sure. Oh, I will actually like to use this here as well, our little utility method that we have created. Because we will probably or no, you know what, we don't care if the email or display name contains uppercase or lowercase letters, but the check will only be done on lowercase ones. So, for example, in my case, even if I have my nickname of Neobit Solutions, no matter what the casing is, nobody will be able to select that particular letter structure that I have in my nickname or display name. And last thing is to also export the types from here, and voila, that's it. This is our table structure. This is everything that we need in order to start implementing the logic. And before we actually go ahead and do that, I will also like to set up, as I mentioned previously, the relations for our tables. And again, this is something that is not necessarily needed. I just like to make sure that I have this. From Drizzle ORM. And in our case, we will only have a one-to-one relationship. Okay, like so. And will be with the user table. And in here, I will have the fields from, yeah, that's it. So this basically tells Drizzle ORM, so not the SQLite engine. For SQLite, we have this reference right here, but the relationship is for Drizzle ORM to know that our profiles table or the user ID field in the profiles table has reference to the user's table ID. Okay, and our feedback doesn't have actually any reference at all, but we have quite a few in here. So the invites, our invites don't have an actual relation, but our users table does. And in fact, I think that the users has the most relations. Okay, so export user relations will be a relations definition. And okay, I will take this, but I think we also have many relations. So first of all, we have our, okay, so invite session. Okay, so all of these are correct because, oh no, actually not with the invites, but with the session verification code and roles, actually users roles. With all these tables, we have a many reference. So a user can have many sessions, many verification code, and many users roles. But we also have our profile reference, which is a one-on-one, as we mentioned. And this will be our profiles table, and in here we will have fields, which will be user ID, references the profile user ID. Okay, now we will basically do the same thing, but for our other tables that have a one reference to the users table. And in our case, we will start with user relationships. Okay, sessions, actually, sorry about that. Session relations. And yeah, Copilot seems to be nailed this one. Seems to have nailed this one. Sorry about that. Also for the verification codes, same relation. And roles actually has, thank you very much, a many relation with users roles. And the final one is the users roles table, which has basically a one of reference to both roles and the users table. Okay, and with that out of the way, we are indeed done with our database schema. So our schema looks perfect. Now, what I would like to do is to let's check if Wrangler. No, so I think because we don't use our database, the Wrangler binding didn't create a local version for us. And one thing that I think will help us with that is actually connecting to our database. And we will come back to that in just a second. So the next steps moving forward are as follow. First, we need to add some scripts for our for interfacing with the database. I like to add in package.json some scripts for migrations, or actually creating the migrations, also applying them. So we have the Drizzlekit generate command, which will create the migrations. We will be using Wrangler in our case for actually migrating the database. And also, I think it was already added a DB Studio command for using Drizzle Studio. But the thing is that locally, if we want to use our database, we will need Wrangler to create an actual SQLite file, which will be present in this Wrangler directory. After that will be done, we will need to use our environment file in here, and we will actually need to pass the database URL, which will be the local DB file. Of course, again, as I mentioned, that's only if you want to use Drizzle Studio. Otherwise, under the hood, when you actually start the application, I think that Wrangler is responsible for interfacing with our database. It's, I think, creating something like a proxy in which you can use that. And why is that? Because when you are using anything in a Cloudflare environment, which is in our case, we are using Cloudflare workers, which are basically serverless environments. We don't actually have a traditional database connection, or a connection to a database in a traditional sense, but actually each request needs to have let's say the database injected. That's where in our case, the Sveltekit platform will be responsible for. And if we take a look at the documentation, the Sveltekit adapters, and I will need the Cloudflare one. Okay, so now deployment is this one right here, the runtime APIs. The environment object contains project bindings like key value stores. In our case, you can see here an example, durable objects namespace, which I think the durable objects is something for blob storage, or was that R2? I can't remember exactly. And also our DB binding, which we will be using. Okay, so you can see here that it mentions that based on our Wrangler configuration, we will have our env populated in a dev environment. But I'm not 100% sure if that is the responsibility of Svelte or Wrangler. I think probably is Wrangler in our case. Okay. Good. Let's see. So, yeah, because we will actually need, and I think we can safely close all these ones. Because we will be having a, or we use this serverless environment in which we need to inject our database in each request. That's why I deleted, if you remember here, we had the client instantiated, but we will not be using that. In our case, we will be using the hooks, which I think they should be in source. If I remember correctly. Let me double check that in the documentation. Yeah, hooks, and we need the server hooks. And we will come to this in a little moment. But before we do that, let me just quickly go in here. And actually, we will also need to change our Wrangler configuration. But first, instead of having this db push command, I will have a db generate Yeah, this one is the command that we will be using to actually generate our migration files. And then I will have a script for migrating, or the simple migrate one will be used in our production environment, so in our pipeline, which hopefully I will remember to add it. And we will need our database name. So this is the command that we need, and we need to specify the remote flag. And for our local one will be basically the same, but we will be using this local flag instead of the remote one. And yeah, those are all the commands that we need. Let's go ahead and... Oh, wait. I just remembered that this is not actually our Expensio project. It will be later. Let's just rename this to Sveltekit. Let's double check. Okay, so yeah, it's with a dash. This will be our database name. We will be using this a bit later because we have to set up another thing, but what I wanted to do is make sure that our db generate command works. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I knew that we will hit this error when we are generating, but let me just try this quickly. If I use a TypeScript configuration file and try to generate, okay, so it will error out. Okay. And you don't seem to like that. Okay, I will just keep the JavaScript file, and where do we have that? Yeah, it's in here. So it doesn't know about our alias. This one, okay. So yeah, this is where we should import those. And with that, boom, it worked perfectly. Nice. And you can see that our migrations directory was created. And we have our first migration, which is really nice. Okay, in order to make sure that we have anything we need to continue with this, I would like to add a couple of things in here. First and foremost is the triggers. So you see that we have for some of our tables, in our case, the feedbacks and the profiles table, we have this updated at column, which is something used for tracking. In order for this to work, and in order for us not having to actually update this value whenever we do something, so whenever we create something, we will have the default value, and it's fine with us. But if we just leave it like that, sorry, whenever we, for example, update our profile, yeah, something that I forgot, a profile picture, that would be good to probably have, but I'm not sure. Do I want that now? Probably. Usually I just, until I set up the blob storage, which probably won't be anytime soon because of some considerations, I will probably add, and let me just make sure that I just delete the source lib server db migrations directory. I'll regenerate this. Let's just add a profile picture. This will be just a text, so if you really want a profile picture, you just have to provide and this can be null, a link to an image. So yeah. Now let's regenerate our migration, and with that I'll come back to what we have here. So for example, if you want to update your profile picture, let's say if you don't do anything, you will need that, or you'll need to make sure to have this step taken care of in the application logic. But because it's something that is done so often, I like to make sure to add, and I will just put a comment in here. We will create a database trigger for this. And what we will do here is create trigger if not exists. It should be called update. Let's take the first one, feedbacks updated at. I want to do a before update on feedbacks for each row, and we will do an update feedbacks, and yeah, that's it. We will set the updated at to the current timestamp, and we will do the same thing for our profiles table. Like so. And this trigger will ensure that we will automatically have our updated ad columns updated with fresh values, with fresh timestamp whenever we do anything on our tables. The last thing that we will need here is to feed some data for our authentication structure. In our case, I like to add a user for our email. And first we will do the invites table. I think, do we need a reference? I'm not sure. You know what? I think, yeah, we just need the email and active status, and we will have contact at neobit.solutions with a value of true. I will have an admin role, but let me just quickly grab something. Okay, so I'll also like to add, and probably an enum as well for this part. This will probably be used later, but just in case, I like to have it as such. So this is something that is pretty common, so that's why I like to have a a constant value for the ID of this role. Also, we will need, so only the invite will do for our email, but because I'd like to be a bit easier to have access to the app, I will also make sure to add an user for our email right here. Because if I only insert the invite, it will be fine. I will be able to log in, but I will need to create an account first. And I'd like to avoid that. Then also let's make sure that we have a profile for our user. Okay, and yeah, I like this. Select ID. I need to double check that to make sure that it works. Okay. And let's also make the user with this email. An admin. And that should be it for let's double check. Okay, it all seems correct. So yeah, this should be our seed right here, and this is everything that we need for our migration file. Okay, now that we are done with this, we can actually go into setting up our database connection. And let's think for a minute. First things first, I think that we will just go and update our Wrangler configuration. And let me quickly grab the I think we actually do we have it in here? We have the commands, the configuration. Okay, good. So this is what we need, and I think that if we don't have an environment, it will actually by default go to what we have as a production environment. And what we'll need to do is copy this part right here. So in our D1 databases, in our case, we will just have one database. Our binding will be called DB. We will have a name of, let me just quickly copy it from here, will be Sveltekit starter. We will add our database ID a little bit later after we actually create the database, because first we need to create the production version of this. First, I want to, provide a migration directory, which will be, we can just copy this from here. Is this one right here, and also add a migration stable, because we know that Drizzle will put the migrations. So I'm not sure if we need this anymore. It's just a habit of mine to keep putting this, because at some point it didn't Wrangler, or actually D1, didn't know where to look for the migrations that were applied, and you needed to specify this table right here. But yeah, other than that, I think that is all that we need. And just to make sure that we have everything hooked up, in here I will just go make sure to log in to Cloudflare. Okay, give me a second. Allow this. Okay. And now that I've logged in, I need to make sure something. Okay, so this is commented up. Nice. Okay, I can just go in here and run this command. Okay, I can go npm Wrangler D1 create, and let me just quickly grab the name from here, like so. And voila, a new database was created for me. I'll just make sure to grab this ID and paste it in here. Okay, so apparently I also copied one of this. And that's our configuration. Or actually, to be more precise, this is our Wrangler configuration that we needed to set up. We will need just one quick thing here in our app. In here, in the platform section, so in here, no, it should be in here. Yeah. We need to have an environment. In here, this environment object will automatically be injected by the platform for us. And I think this was typed at some point. I can't remember exactly. Let me check to see if I have anything. I don't exactly remember, but yeah, I think there was a type for this at some point, definitely. Okay, let's just make sure that our locals also have a DB, because we will be setting this one up in our okay, and let me just move these comments right here. We will set this in our hooks, and actually that is the next step. And you know what, we can just remove these and add them if or whenever we need those. And with that out of the way, we can have in here, we can export const handle, which should be an async method with an event and resolve. And one thing that I like to do is first to destructure our event right here at the top. And oh, so I think that I have an issue. Okay. And we don't have, oh, well, actually, I think we have types. Yeah, nice. So even though it's something that, no, let's just go one thing at a time. First, we will need a platform. And I like to make sure, because technically this can be undefined. And in case we don't have a platform, or this object is a nullish value, we'll just use the Sveltekit error with a 500. Else, in here, we will actually get the locals from our event, and in here we will set the DB be equal to Drizzle and platform.environment.db. And this will ensure that our database is binded to this locals object. In case you didn't know, in Sveltekit, locals is basically like a piece, depending on how you look at it, let's say like a repository, or no, actually more like a context, an HTTP context, where you can set stuff for each request that you make. So imagine that we have various things that we do, like authenticate the user, we will have sign in, sign out, sign up, we'll have actions for those, and also loading methods. So all of those stuff will have access to anything that we put here in locals. So it's shared across requests. And because we have this handle hook, which actually it's a piece of middleware that intercepts any request that is made. In each request, we make sure to populate with this locals.db with our instance of the Drizzle database provided by this binding right here. And with that out of the way, we can just go and return resolve of event. And voila, that's it. This is our database being binded. And I'm not sure if just having this right here will... let me just restart the dev server for good measure. I think this is not sufficient for Wrangler to create our database. I think we actually need to use this binding somewhere, and only after that we will be able to see the file create. Oh, okay, so it knew that we have a binding, but it didn't create the database for us. Okay, in that case, we will just force it. Let's just go to our routes. And okay, this will be server.ts. And until we will actually use it, we will just... or actually, you know what? I don't even need to do this, because I can just go in here and locals.db. And I have a select, and I can just oh no, actually it's, I think it's select that from users. Okay, you know what, let's just find this and console.log this one. Okay, and let's just await this here. And this will actually be an user. Of course, we will... Okay, so no such table. Nice. Why it's nice that we get this error is because now you can see that we actually have our database created. So that's it. In order for Wrangler, and actually I think it's the mini flare binding of Wrangler, to create this locally, you just need to have it used somewhere. And with that, you can just copy, and I think a relative path will do. And you can go in your environment and set this database URL right here. Yeah, I think for the migration, let me just check quickly. Okay, so we have pnpm db migrate local. I think that is how we name this command. Okay, so apparently that's nice. You don't even need the database URL in order for this to work. And now if I refresh, after a bit of thinking, everything will be working. And you can see that after my migration was ran, in which we also have a seed phase, we actually have our user here, which is really nice. Now with this, The last thing that I want to show right now is you can update your .m file, and let me just quickly grab this out of the way in order to not leak anything. And I think this will do. Okay, let me just... I want to switch this with this. Okay, and now what I want to show you is the next command. Which is our local instance of Drizzle Studio, which I'm wondering, okay, so now it opened. So here you can see the database management system provided by Drizzle by default. And here you can see a similar database structure to what we will have in our production. And this is quite nice. You can navigate here. You can see we have our invites table. We have our row added by default. We have our profile. One really cool thing that I like about Drizzle Studio is this thing right here. So you can see that we have this user, and I think that this is because we are using those relations tables right there. Oh, actually structures, sorry. It knows and it will show you anything that this entity has a reference to. For example, if I go into the users, you can see everything right here. So you will be able to see all the profiles. Actually, it will be a profile. I'm not sure why it's plural, because it's a one-to-one. Maybe it's just a mistake, or it's an actual typo on my side. Because if it's not a typo, it means that... Okay, so it's not because of our relations. I think it's automatically inferring the database keys. And this is interesting because you can see I have a profile and I also have profiles. That's weird. I think it uses both things. I'm not sure. But also you will be able to see here everything that the user has associated. For example, if you were to have multiple roles, you will see all of them right here, which is really nice. Okay, and that's everything that we need for a base database setup. I think that this should be a good step. Okay, just one more quick thing, and toilet, no. Let's not leave this in here. One thing that I think I have, yeah. You can see that in my GitHub workflow that I'm using for deployment. This is really interesting. Why didn't I deploy this? Ah, okay, so it doesn't need these secrets right here. So I had this step for running the migration when actually deploying. and I commented it because at the time I didn't bother to clean this up. I just commented the part that I don't need. And now with our database set up in place, we can just run the migrate command, which is cool. Okay. Now, with that, I think this would be a good point to throw a quick commit. Or let's call it set up the DB structure. Great. And with that, the first step that we wanted to take towards implementing authentication is done. The next thing to do will be actually getting into the fun part. But first, I think we will take a quick break. And after 10-15 minutes, we will come back and see what or where we will actually leave off tonight, because probably we will not be able to set up the entire authentication flow, but at least we will start with the basics. So catch you in a bit. All right. We're back. So, let's see. Thinking about what to do next, I realized that there are actually quite a lot of moving parts that we will need to set up for this. So, let's just quickly iterate over what we'll need to do. So basically, we will have multiple pages that we will need to set up for this. We will have a sign in, a sign up, a sign out, and a verify page. Each one with its responsibilities, which are pretty clear. When the user will sign up, a user and a profile will be created. and also a verification code will be sent to the email. After that, the user will be redirected to the verify page where it will need to provide the code sent to the email. And when that is done, or actually I think that's the point where we actually create the session for the user. After that, or the next part would be, so the verify page is where we will check the code, make sure it's not expired, it's still valid, and based on that create the user session, and then the user will be logged in. Then the sign in will just make sure that the user exists, and if it does, it will generate the verification code. And then again, the same thing, it will redirect to the verify page, and the session for that user will be created. And the sign out will just delete the session, and we will store, in order to know that the user is signed in, we will have a cookie set. And the sign out will just delete the session and wipe the cookie. And in our hook, in our handle hook, we will set up some logic to make sure that whenever a user tries to access something that needs authentication, we actually have the user. Otherwise, we'll redirect to the sign-in page. And with this structure, we actually have some parts that we will need to integrate. So the external services that we'll need for this will be the email provider. In our case, will be Resend. We'll be using that to send emails. And also, because these are publicly facing actions, I would like to set up a CAPTCHA. In our case, we will be using the Turnstile, Cloudflare Turnstile for this. And is actually, there is a Sveltekit package that integrates that, which is nice. Let's see. We also need to set up our server actions, and I also like to have a separate services. This is what I like to call that structure. Things that hold up the logic part, like interfacing with the database, creating, in our case, if we take a look at what Lucia provides in the basic API for SQLite, these methods right here for generating a session token, creating a session, validating the token, and so on and so forth. This is what we will store in our logic, and also stuff like creating a user and a profile. We will also need to use for our forms, because we'll be using forms on the pages that make use of that, like the sign in, the sign up, and also the verify. We'll have forms that will send data back to the server in an action, and there we will be using Zod validation. And also we will need to set up the forms using, technically it's under the hood, using Superforms and Formsnap. And we will take things step by step. I just want to, lay out all the moving parts that we will be needing throughout our logic, or our flow, our authentication flow. And because up until this point we just coded stuff and it was nothing that interesting. I thought that it would be a good idea to just start with creating some basic UI, and we will start, because we already have a user, we can just start with the sign-in steps. And for that, we can create the routing structure that we will need. And if you remember from our previous sessions, I mentioned that I like to use groups for this. And this is another route group that we will be using. So first, let's actually create the app route group. In here, we will have a dashboard. Oh, no. Yeah, okay, so it's a directory. Okay. And in our dashboard, we will have a plus page dot svelte for the moment. And for the moment, let's just put an H1 in here. We will come back to this a bit later. And for this, let's just call it dashboard, like so. And now, if I were to just navigate, so this will be our protected route. Only an authenticated user should be able to view this page. At this point, any user can see this, which is not what we want. And for this, let's just do the base auth guard flow in here. Let me just check to see if we have anything mentioning that. So, not necessarily. Okay, store the token to the client. We have this for the session cookie. Okay, so we have something in here. Okay, but I think that the actual code that we will need is in one of the examples. So what we will need to do is to in the hooks, I mean, this is a bit backwards, but whatever. Let's just build it piece by piece. So the first thing to do would be to get the session token right here, and let's just grab this. Let's just destructure further our event, and in here we will call cookies.get, but instead of actually having the name hard-coded in here, let's just, okay, so we have our constants here. So we will have an const session cookie name, which will be session token. Yeah, we can just call it session. I don't think it's that important. And instead of hard coding the name in here, we will be using session cookie name from utils. And another thing that would probably be a good idea to set up now. After we make sure that we have a session and we have a user and also probably a profile associated with this, we would like to set this up in our locals. So for this, we will have a couple of things that we will set at the appropriate times. First, we will have a user which be of type user select from our DB or null. We will have a session which be a session select or null, and this is not necessarily needed right now, but just for the sake of it, let's put it in here like so. We will have a profile and also the roles of the user. Which will be an array of user roles select. Great. And now in our hook, we can just go and make sure that we check if we don't have a session token, like so. We set all of the things, even the roles. You know what? Let's just set those like so. And one thing that I also like to take from here, our route, our current route, and a quick check. This is not technically needed because this will automatically be done by Svelte. So if we don't have a route ID, we will throw an error of 404. This is technically done automatically because this can be a string or null, but it makes easier for us to check down further because technically TypeScript doesn't know that at this point Sveltekit will definitely error out if it doesn't find this. So we need to tell it in the code, because here if we check that our route ID, you will see that in here it's typed a string, so not a string or null. And here we need to check if the route includes our app group. We will redirect to login, and I keep forgetting the correct status codes. Let me just quickly grab a reference. 300. Okay, so let's take a look at the MDN reference. So 300, multiple choices. Okay, not interesting for us. 301, move permanently. The URL has been changed permanently, so not our use case. 302, found. And 303, see other. So I think we are between a 303 or 302. Let me quickly see in Let's see an example. Okay, let's grab this quickly. I think probably it would be a 303 response in that case. Okay, so it doesn't have it in here. Maybe we have something here. Okay, so it's a 302 in the example. If you don't have a session or a user. But 302. Okay. Well, let's leave it like so. And in our case, it will be sign in. This will be our route. So if you don't have a user, if you don't have a session token, we will redirect the user to sign in. Okay. Otherwise, we will need to to validate the session token and do a bunch of stuff like setting the locals. But for the moment, we will just leave it like so, just so we see something happening. And let's also go into our routes, create our auth group. We will have our sign in and last page. That's Svelte. Let's put a quick H1 in here. And let's just quickly check this out. So if we go to sign in, great, we have this. If we go to our dashboard, okay, interesting. Do I have something? Okay. So probably we didn't need to clear those, but just in case. Okay, nice. Now if I go to sign in, it works. And now if I go to dashboard, great, it redirected me. Probably from other tests that I made on apps where I actually had the cookies set there. It saw that I had a session cookie and it didn't redirect me, but I forgot to clear this. So now on my local host, I'm not a signed user. So if I try to go to the dashboard, I'm automatically redirected to sign in, which is great. It's what we wanted. After we will set up the sign in, we will come back here and let's just put a comment. To validate session. Yeah, like so. Now, the next thing to do would be to set up our layout. The same way we have a layout for our public group, we will have a layout for our authentication route group. And in here, or the structure that I like to have is this main right here, this main tag with a grid. Let's set an H screen, and on MD we'll have 2 columns. Now we will have a section right here which we will style in a little bit. For the moment, let's just put our subtitle. I get started now. And in the other section, we will have, let's make use of our state that we have set up. So let's just quickly take a look at what we have here. So if you remember, in our public pages, in order to have a more dynamic layout, sorry about that, and not have to set this up each time we or on each page, we actually have these states right here for title and header. In our case, we will not be using the header for our auth group, but we will be using the title, and we have it in here. So we will quickly grab this. And we will put the head part up here. This one needs to come from state. Let's make sure that we have lang set to TypeScript, and let's also import our app name. And now in our section, we will have an H1, which will be our public page state title. And in here, we will render the children, which will need to come from props. Great. And now on our sign-in page, we will just add the script lang ts. And we will set the title to sign in. Close that one. Okay, it looks good for now. Let's test it. If I go to sign in, great. I mean, it's not looking great, but it's a great start. Now, let's think about this. Usually you'll have something like, I don't know, a head here, a heading tag. Let's just quickly put some lorem ipsum in here. And let's style this a bit. I will need to center this. And for okay, let's just put some padding on the y-axis. Let's put this in a div. And you'll see why in just a second. And probably we'll want this to be a grid with a gap of 4. And in order to style this a bit, make it look a bit prettier, I like to have a BG gradient from or to bottom right, yeah, from our primary color to accent. It should look like something like this. Sometimes I like to play with this and extend the primary part of the gradient with a via primary. Oh, it's a typo. Okay. So yeah, in this particular case, well, I think I will just keep it like so. I'd like that the primary color pops a little bit more than if we just use a plain gradient. And in our particular case, this looks good. Oh, and this is because we are actually on a dark mode, but on light mode you can see that this doesn't have enough contrast. So let's just put a background. Let's just take a quick look on how a background would look like so. Okay, and you know what? It actually looks pretty good. And let's prettify this a bit. Let's put a padding around it of small. I think we can increase this to an MD. Yeah, it looks much better now. And also, let's use a text primary for both of our headings right here. In this particular case, it doesn't look that good. So I think we will just remove for this part right here. And let's just add some blur. Yeah, it's subtle, but it works a little bit better. It's like that, I think it's called less morphic effect. Okay, and let's just also style this part right here. Okay, but instead of having this one like so, I'd like to also have the padding relative to the view width. So we have 4 view width units worth of padding, which I think it works great for, and I don't want this centered like so. It works better for, let's say, how is it called? Responsive design, yeah. Because this is, for example, what it would look like on an iPad, and on a mobile phone it would look like so, which is good. Okay, now with this part, which is basically a nice way that I like to set up this sign-in structure, and I think if we take a look, I think that before blocks there was an examples page. Yeah, so Shadcn. Okay. Okay, nice. So previously, if you're not aware, there was a blocks and an examples page, and basically there were the same thing, but just different sorts of examples. And I think that the unfortunate part is that you don't have an email list anymore, which was really cool. But let's take a look at authentication. So you can see here examples like this one. Basically, this is what I try to replicate there. And it's the same thing, but just flip side. Okay, now with the layout finished, let's go on the sign-in page and start adding some content in here. First of all, we will have our form, and we will not need an action because it will be the default one. We'll just put a nice grid gap 4 right here and method post. And we will also need a paragraph right here. we will have a link to the sign up page. And now we should populate our form. But in order to do that, we first need to create our form, which will be done in our server.ts file. But first, we will actually need to have a Zod schema for this one. And I like to have a separate directory in our lib for that. Called schemas, and we will have an index.ts in here. And we will soon create an auth file. But first, as I mentioned previously, we will have a CAPTCHA token. And for that one, I like to specify another our schemas. I'll have a common.ts where I export a CAPTCHA token, which will be, and let me just quickly, no, we don't have Zod installed. Okay, so I think that otherwise we have Superform, Formsnap. Okay, so yeah, Zod is the only thing that is missing. And let's bring up another terminal. And add Zod. Nice. Now, it's Zod installed. We can have a Zod string. And one thing that we need to do is make sure that in our barrel tunnel, because we will be using everything that is in common throughout our other schema definitions. So because I have automatic sorting enabled, if I just save this, it will put some things above the common export, like auth, for example. And If I try to reference something from common in auth, I'll get an error. That's why this neat little trick right here with the comment will prevent the auto sorting to put something on top of the common. And now we can actually define our sign-in schema. But because we have stuff that, like for example, the email will be common for both the sign-in and the sign-up schema, I like to define a base part here. A Zod object with an email. With a minimum of 6 characters. And maximum of 255. And I also like to provide a required error right here. And now I can go ahead and export my sign-in schema, which will be this user schema merged with our captcha schema. Which I think I made a slight mistake. Okay. So this need to be a Z object. Okay. And now everything should work. So I'm not sure if there is any benefit. So you can use either extend or merge. Usually I like to use merge when I have two predefined schemas, and use extend when I add something on top of a schema. I'm not sure if there are actually performance benefits or drawbacks from using one over another. I think there might be, but usually in a code base where you don't have hundreds of schema definition, I don't think it should be a problem. And for some reason, I think if I just reopen. Okay, now it's working. Great. And that's all we need for our sign-in, an email and a captcha token. And now we can just go in our sign-in and export our load method. And in here, I keep missing the structure right here. So usually it's probably a good way to type your methods. At least these ones automatically generated by Sveltekit. But the thing is that through some neat trick of having the extension, you don't actually need to do that, because you can see it's automatically red right here. So you have the type definition. And one thing that we will do is take our session and user and do a quick check. If we have our session and user, we will just redirect to dashboard. Else, if not, we will just return our form. And for that, we need to use super validate from Superforms. And we pass the Zod adapter, which hopefully I should find somewhere. Okay. Yeah, Sveltekit Superforms adapters, and I'm not sure why it's complaining. Okay, this is a bit weird. Because this should be a valid Zod object. Okay, this is a weird one. Let's just take a quick look at the official documentation. Let's see. Yeah, so our form should be working properly, because I see the same thing that we did. It's really weird that we get this type error. I'm not sure why is this. I'll need to check this a bit later, because it seems like it's running, so we don't get any problem there. Yeah, it's weird. We'll probably take a look a little bit later. But let's just continue building our form. We will actually need the data props in order to be able to access our form. And we will have our form, which will be a super form. And here we will have some options to pass. The first thing that we will need will be these validators for client-side validation. In here, we will pass our sign-in schema. But I also like to set up a couple of I think they are called event handlers, something like that. So yeah, in Zod you have multiple events, and we will be using this on update and on error to display some messages. And on our case, oops. And in here, I would like to take the result. So this on update, if we take a look at the documentation, is basically when we get back a result. So this is these are the events that we are interested in. In case we have an error or exception, we will handle that with a pop-up, a toaster. And in case of a success or a failure, which is something with a 400 status code, which means there is something on the user, we will handle that as well. So first, if our result.type is a failure, so basically something with a 400 status code, I want to check and see if I have on the data any message. If so, I'll create a toast, but for creating a toast, I actually have a neat little, we go into utils and create a toast.ts file. I have this handle error utility method, which is basically displaying a message with a delay of 7 seconds. But I also have this default error message that I like to use. So in here I can pass this handle error. Oh, and let me just quickly go and export it from Toast, so that way I can just import from utils. Okay. Otherwise, return. If we don't hit this case, it means that we don't have a failure and we actually the request was made successfully. So in that case, authentication succeeded. Let's just and at that point we know that an email was sent to the user with the code. Right, and when that is done, we can, sorry about that, we can just do a client-side redirect to the verify page. And on error, in case we have an actual exception throw in the code, we will just use the handle error toast, but with this default message of contacting support, because this is something that the user can't address and it's our responsibility to be notified if something like that happens. And now we can actually take the form data we will need, but not from props, but actually from the form itself. Oops. From the form. And also we will need the enhance. We can use here. Use enhance. Oops. And now we can use our form component a form field in which we need to pass our form and a name, which will be email. We will have a form control and in here we will have a form label for email and an input where we will spread the props and also find the value from the for data dot, come on, at email. Okay. It took a while to see that. And at the end, we will have a form button. And now if I navigate to the page, you will be able to see the form. One more thing that we need to add is our CAPTCHA control. And for that, we will need to quickly grab the Svelte Turnstile package. And in here, I will quickly copy this form control, but in this case will be for CAPTCHA token. And I will be having an input, not a label, but this one will be a type hidden with the actual value of the CAPTCHA token. And instead of this, I will have Turnstile or Turnstile. I'm not sure. I think it's Turnstile because Turnstile probably should have a Y in the name. And in here we need to pass a couple of things. We will need to go ahead and in constants add another one for Cloudflare Turnstile side key, and we will also have a secret. Let me just quickly go onto the Cloudflare dashboard. Here under Turnstile, you need to add a new widget. And I think I will call this Sveltekit starter. I think I need to add one like so for localhost. And let's just quickly go and check out our deployed version. Where can I get it? I think I actually have it here. Okay. And I need just the host name. Great. And now I'll create this, but in another window, because it will give me, okay, so I can show you the side key. That's not a problem, but the secret key. That I cannot do, but I'll just make sure to add it in here in the env example. And now let me just quickly go and add it in the actual environment file. Okay, and now I can go in here and in the sideKey property, I can take the sideKey and also I have this on callback right here. Where I have this event and I can set the value for form data capture token to event that detail that token, and this will make sure to bind my actual token from Turnstile to the form. And now if I go to sign in, you'll see that indeed I have the widget like so. Ooh, okay. And the last thing we'll do is just, unfortunately, we will not be able to finish everything right now, but let's just create the default action. We actually receive something. And I will take the request. And again, the same issue. I have no idea why. Indeed, if the form is not valid, I'll return a fail, which comes, I will want the Superform fail, the 400 and the form. Otherwise, I will just return the form. And for the moment, let's just console.log form.data and see that we get something back. Okay, and after a refresh, if I continue with email and check back the console, voila, we have our object. Now, we have quite a few things to do. Next. Let's just quickly do the easy part. You know what? Actually, I think this is good place to stop for the moment. For the sign-in, basically, we will have a few more things to do, which will be to validate the CAPTCHA token that we received, to make sure we create the user. And actually, the first thing would be to check if we already have the user, means that if we have the user can sign in. Otherwise, if there's no user, first we need to sign up. After that, we will need to create the user and then send the email to the user. Create the verification code and then send the email with that verification code. And only then our sign-in action will be complete. So after that, of course, we will continue with our verify page, where we will validate the code inserted by the user. Then we will continue with the sign out and with the sign up. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our to see how our Sveltekit starter starts to show some life. And I will hopefully catch you in the next one, which will be tomorrow. And probably because in my country on Monday we have day off, I'll try to continue to see if I can finish up the auth part. I'm guessing that probably tomorrow it will not be done, but maybe Monday it will be. I will leave a link in the description below. Actually, in the chat, sorry. Maybe when the video comes out, I will put in the description as well. If you want to check out the repository. And I hope to see you again tomorrow. Well, have a nice day and keep iterating. Bye bye.